Well, hi there, my name is Dan, and I'm one of the pastors here at Parker Hill. And we're starting off this year with this series to help you make this year count. I love the title, How to Eat an Elephant. And if you came here expecting us to teach you how to cook up a 6-ton animal, you're going to be disappointed. That's not what we're talking about. This actually comes from this idea from a saying that maybe you're familiar with. It's an ancient one. It goes like this. You can't eat an elephant all in one bite, but you could eat an elephant one bite at a time. You can't get it all at once, but you could get it little bit by little bit. And the elephant in your life is the behemoth that keeps beating you. It's that obstacle that keeps overcoming you every year. It's those relationship problems that you keep falling into over and over again. It's the financial stress that suffocates you. It's even those spiritual setbacks that are really getting you down and out this year. And last week, Mark shared with us from a part of the New Testament called 1 Peter, and he showed us that change is possible. It's even inevitable if we will bake our desires into our everyday routines. In fact, the secret of life change goes like this. It's our routines, not our resolutions, that bring results. It's our routines, not our resolutions, that bring results. And when I look at you, and I look out at the year stretching in front of us, I'm excited. I'm excited because this year can be the year for you. This year can be the year where you overcome or you eat that elephant. And so we are praying for you that this year will be that year in your life. And I don't know how you start off the year. I don't know how you approach New Year's resolutions or starting out with a fresh year. Maybe you're like the optimist. You're the person that picks every area of your life, and then you pick a goal for every area of your life, and you're so excited to try to accomplish it all in a year. Or maybe you're more like the pessimist. You say, oh yeah, I'll make a resolution, and I'll break it too. Or maybe you're like the cynic. You're watching everyone else make resolutions and buy gym passes, and you're just laughing to yourself about all that stuff that's not going to get used. Or maybe you're more like the realist. Maybe you look at everything that's going on at the beginning of a new year, and you think, I'm not even going to bother. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything. Why even try? I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. It's working so far. Now, I don't know how you approach those New Year resolutions. I don't know if you're the optimist or the pessimist or the cynic or the realist. But here's two things I do know about New Year's resolutions. I do know that we all want to change. There's a place that we'd all like to get to in our lives. We'd like to be more loving or more forgiving. We'd like to make better decisions or break free from some sin in our lives. We'd all like to experience a more fulfilling life, not the one that everyone else is selling, but the real deal. But here's what else I know. Change is really hard. Change is really hard. And if you, throughout the week at your job, work with or lead 20 people or 200 people or just yourself, you know that the biggest challenge on the face of the earth is not innovation or execution, it's behavior modification. It's changing yourself. And you can visualize your journey towards change like a map. And we all have a place that we want to be, that's our letter B up there. And we all have a place where we are, that's our letter A down here. And it's going to take a while for us to get from where we are to where we want to be. It's a journey. It's going to take hard work, it's going to take effort, and it's going to take time. And what will happen, I promise you, to anyone that sets out from A to B, is that you will face resistance. It will be challenging. You will face obstacles that will threaten to take you off course. It will lead you into the woods here, the woods where we usually get trapped or stopped. And sometimes we end up just living there or sliding back to where we started until next year, when we look at our B and think, I want to be there. And we set out again, and then we get stuck in the woods again. And we might stay there for a little while, or we might slide back again. And so our journey towards change gets short-circuited partway through the journey. You been there? I certainly have. I've certainly set off with extreme enthusiasm to change something about myself or my life, only to get stopped. And then go back at it the next year and think, this is going to be the year. I'm going to do it, right? And I set out with great enthusiasm, and I get stopped. See, we all want to change, and change is really hard. But there's something else that's a fact. And I want to remind you of this so that you don't miss it. Yes, every year, millions of people set out to change their lives, and they do not. But also, this is also a fact, every year, millions of people set out to change their lives, and they succeed. Millions of people every year get get out of debt and they lose weight. They do it. They break old relationship habits. They overcome an addiction. They take a hobby and they turn it into a business. They build relationships with their kids that will stand the test of time. Every year, millions of people are finding answers to their heart's questions in a vibrant faith and walk with Jesus Christ. It's happening. So why not you? Why not this year? I know if we're going to do it, we have to get past this part on the journey that stops us so often. We have to find a way through this forest that threatens to trap us and keep us stuck. And Paul's going to show us how to do that in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 through 16. And so you can go ahead and get there in your Bible or your Bible app or the Parker Hill app. Check it out. And as you're getting there, let me explain a little bit about the book of Ephesians to you. We call it the book of Ephesians, but it's actually a letter that Paul wrote to the Ephesian church back in ancient times. It's a really short book. It's 6 chapters, and it neatly divides into 2 parts. The first 3 chapters tell the story of the gospel, the story of what God has done for us. The last 3 chapters contain our story and tell what God wants to do with us. And so we're going to be jumping in the second half so that we can understand what God wants to do with us when it comes to eating our elephant. But to understand what we're about to read, you need to understand one thing first. And so I'm going to jump to that. Here it is. Every Christian is given a spiritual gift. You see, Jesus Christ, God's Son, died on the cross for your sins and rose again. That's why he came to earth. That's what he did, and his love drove him to do it. And if you're here today and you're thinking, I don't know about that. I don't know if I believe that Jesus rose from the dead. I respect that. It's not like that kind of thing happens every day. And it's good for you to be skeptical until you get some of the facts. And so I just want to let you know that our next series, we're going to talk about the facts around the resurrection. You're going to want to be here for that. But when you place your trust in Jesus, you become a follower of Christ. You become a Christian. And at that moment, the Bible tells us a lot of different things happen at once. I mean, you go from being an enemy of God to being forgiven and being a friend of God. You are cleansed. Your record is wiped clean. You're adopted as a son or daughter of God. All this is really awesome, and you become part of God's family. That's the church. I mean, and if that wasn't enough, the Bible tells us that there's more. More happens. It tells us that when we become a Christian, we get a gift from God, a spiritual gift. 1 Corinthians 12:7 says this, "Now to each one the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good." Notice that it says each one. Every single one of us who is a follower of Jesus is given a gift. It's a spiritual gift. And in God's family, it's not like athleticism, all right? Some people are born with coordination and they go on to develop it and become great athletes. You're either born with it or you're not, though. Then you become great at it or you don't. And there are people like that are really good at it, and then there's people like me who are not. The only thing I was ever good at athletically was running, and that's because I had 2 older brothers I was running from all the time. So unlike being athletic, these gifts are given to every follower of Christ. But what in the world is a spiritual gift? Well, here's a simple definition for you. Spiritual gifts are the spiritual capacity to do spiritual work. The spiritual capacity to do spiritual work. You see, God doesn't just make you a part of his family, he makes you a part of his team. You are to play an important role in what God is doing in helping people find the way back to God and growing in their relationship with him. That's what the gift is for. The gift is not for you, it's for the people around you. And there are 5 different places in the New Testament that kind of list some of these different gifts. And I just pulled some of them together. And you listen to some of these gifts as I read them to you. There's the gift of faith and of giving and of serving and of teaching. There's a gift of encouraging and discerning and organizing. Some of you definitely don't have that gift because your bedroom. Some of you have the gift of leading or of showing mercy. Now, my friend and mentor has the gift of encouragement. And so when I talk with him, inevitably he shares some truth with me that I needed to hear and that God wanted me to hear that helps me keep going in the right direction. And that's how these things work. See, God works in and through you to impact the people around you. He makes it possible, and it's all about God and what he can do through you. And because it's God at work, it makes a difference in the lives of other people. Now, we could spend weeks talking about this in the future. We do want to talk about it more. But for right now, I just want you to understand that you've been uniquely gifted by God to make a difference in the lives of people around you. You have something to offer. Now, what does it have to do with eating your elephant, right? So let's jump in where we plan to in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11, where Paul writes this. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up. So Christ himself gave us these gifts. So God has given you a spiritual gift, and then he's given you church leaders to help you develop that gift. You notice that? We're here to help equip you to do what God is calling you to do. So church leaders equip church members to use their gifts. So in this 2 verses, you have both my job description and your job description. And so our staff here is here to teach and to train and to model and to move you into places where you can use the gifting that God has given to you. Church leaders are more like coaches, not like quarterbacks. And our job here is to help you see that and to develop that and to use that so that we win. So church leaders equip church members to do the work of the ministry. So church members use their gifting to build up and build each other up and help each other grow. You see, the members are the ministers. That's what you do, right? Now don't miss this. The church has had a history of messing this one up. This is actually one of the 2 biggest reasons that there was a Reformation in 1517. There was this big mix-up in the church, and they were all confused and created this division between the leadership of the church and the lay people, between the professionals and the parishioners. And the professionals can do all the work of the ministry at that time, and the parishioners could just be the recipients of all of that ministry, which is really tragic, because that's not how God designed it to work. Because God has gifted you. God has gifted you. God has gifted you. He's given you something to offer to the people around you. You have something to offer. Because church leaders are here to develop you to do what God has called you to do. And so we have to get this. We have to kind of rewire our brains and our thinking about how church works, because Christians have been making a mess of this for a while. And so here's what I want us to do to just kind of wipe the slate clean, a couple thousand years of kind of goofing this up. I want us to turn to our neighbors, and you're going to say something to them. I'm going to ask you to say it to them on the count of 3, but I want you to do it with enthusiasm. Remember, you're wiping out a couple centuries of messing this up. I want you to say it with confidence and with boldness. I want you to help them believe it. And so on the count of 3, I want you to turn to your neighbor and tell them that you have something to offer. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. It's so true. I'm glad now that you know it, all right? You have something to offer. And we're not saying that to make you feel good. We're saying that because you are needed. Let's be real. When someone turns to you and says that you have something to offer, many of us, we doubt it. We might downplay it, or we might deflect it. We might not do much with it at all. When someone turns to you and says, you have something to offer, many of us kind of deflect that away and say, okay, yeah, maybe that's nice, but you're really gifted. You use that gift. And it sounds so humble. I mean, it sounds great that you're not trying to make a big deal about yourself, and that is a good thing. But when you act like you do not have something to offer, when you act like God has not gifted you to make a difference in the lives of people around you, that's not humility, that's robbery. And I'll show you why. Ephesians 4:13, next verse. It says, you're all helping each other grow until we all reach the unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. You see, we all reach maturity when all of us help each other grow. The implication is if you don't help, growth doesn't happen. So it's not humility to downplay your gifting, it's robbery from the people around you that could be benefiting from what you could be giving to them. Let's look back at that map together. See, B is this place that we're trying to go. It could be self-control over eating. It could be to be more loving and fighting less. It could be a place of financial freedom. It could be just to get to a place where you look in the mirror and you like what you see instead of hating what you see. But all of those things fall under one category. All of these things are maturity, aren't they? They're growing from being a kid to being an adult. They're growing from being weak to being strong. They're growing from being gullible to being discerning. It's maturity that we're all trying to reach. We're trying to grow up. We're trying to get stronger in an area. It's maturity. And I want you to know something that as I studied this passage jumped out to me that I didn't really get completely before I was studying. And it's brought me a lot of hope. See, I used to think about maturity as something that would happen after I died. You know, like Christ-likeness. Well, Christ was perfect, so being like Christ only happens after you die and you go to heaven and you're sinless, right? I mean, and so I equated maturity with perfection. And so I thought, okay, yeah, I'll kind of grow and things will happen and then eventually I'll die and then we reach maturity. And it's true that something miraculous happens after you die when God finishes the job. But that's not what Paul's talking about here. And here's how we know that. First of all, Paul talks about a progressive development. He talks about this ongoing process. It's not an instantaneous thing, and that's what's going to happen after we die. So it can't be that whole season when you die and God changes everything. It's got to be what's happening now. And the process that he describes is something that we do by God's power to each other, not something that God does to us in an instant. And so that proves to us that what Paul is talking about here is achieving maturity, growing into strength in a certain area, actually changing happens in the here, happens on this side of heaven. Now, you might have been beat up. You might have lost a lot of battles. You might wonder, am I ever going to change? Is that even supposed to happen in this lifetime? I'm here to tell you, God says, yes, it is possible. We can change. And it can happen here on this side of eternity. This verse is saying that we can reach those destinations that we're hoping to reach on this side. You can change. You can reach maturity. You can be free from that sin that's beating you up. And so we got to ask the question, okay, we start here. We know we can end up over here. What's up with that stuff in the middle? Why do we keep getting stuck? Verse 14 tells us. It says, then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. It's describing here how we get stuck in the woods in the middle. I mean, what is that place that stops our progress? Well, he's telling us. He's saying it's lies. It's a tangle of lies and deception and scheming. It is that place where something that is not true trips us up. And so you set out with great gusto, you want to accomplish something, and then you fall into believing that, man, you're not going to change. It's taking way too long. It's never going to happen. Or you fall into believing that God is not for you. You fall into believing that you're alone. You fall into believing that there is no hope. You fall into believing that it just doesn't matter. Why even try? You fall into believing that you're unlovable, so what's the point? We believe all kinds of lies, and we get stuck. And it keeps us from moving forward toward maturity. In our spiritual lives, we're all starting out like little children. That's how it starts. And we're gullible, and we're easily fooled. Now, my aunt had this great sense of humor. She was a ton of fun to be around. And I remember being a little kid and riding in the car with her, and we drove past one of those signs that says, watch for falling rock. And my aunt said to me, you know why that sign's there? I'm like, no, what's that sign there for? And she said, well, there's an Indian prince who was lost. His name was Falling Rock. And they're trying to find him and get him back to his family. I may or may not have believed that for a while, okay? Now, we all start out like that, like children, like gullible, believing what people tell us. And the illustration that Paul is using is of being an infant, of being a child, or being a boat that's tossed by the wind and the waves, or like a leaf that's being blown around in the wind. And all of them paint this picture of us being unstable and gullible or lacking discernment. All of them paint this picture of us having trouble spotting the lies that are holding us back in our lives. And make no mistake, the enemy is trying to trick you. I mean, notice all the words that Paul is using to make this clear to us. He says teaching, that's intentional communication. He says there's cunning and there's craftiness and there's deceitful scheming. There's a whole strategy behind this thing of tripping you up and stopping you from making progress. And we all fall for these lies at one point or another in our lives. That's why we need each other's help. And here's how it works. Verse 15. Instead of falling into the trap, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of Him who is the head, that is Christ. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. See, we each help each other get through that briar patch of lives by speaking the truth in love to one another. And as our lives match up with the truth that we believe, we help each other grow. Now, there's kind of a broad meaning to this when you look into the language. And it actually doesn't just mean you speak and you say the truth. It doesn't just mean you say truth and you say it lovingly. It's bigger than that. The idea actually is that you are doing the truth, that you are living the truth, that you are, this is not even a word, but that you're truthing. That's the idea. That out of your life comes what you believe. And that when your life matches up with what you say you believe, you're living the truth. And that truth, wrapped in love, impacts the other people in your life. I know you've had this happen, right? A friend of yours loses a job, you're worried for him. You're thinking, where's the money going to come from? How are they going to find a job? And are they even going to make it? And then you start talking to them, and they encourage you. And they tell you, God's got this. God always takes care of his own. And you walk away from the conversation and your faith has grown. And they're the ones that helped you, even though they were going through the hard time. See, the way that when you live like that, it leaves a mark on other people. And even though you don't have everything, what they have helps supply some of it. And even though you realize you don't have everything, they supply some of it. And even though they don't have everything, you supply some of it. And it works back and forth as you are living out the truth. It's not like you get all of it and then you bestow it to other people. You have an area of your life where you're growing in strength and you offer it. And they have an area in their life where they're growing in strength and truth and they offer it. And as you guys hang out together and interact with one another, you help each other grow into maturity. So it kind of works like this, like your passion challenges my lack of passion. But then my activism challenges your apathy. But then your understanding challenges my lack of depth. And then my faith challenges your fear. And then your love challenges my selfishness. And then my wisdom, it challenges your impulsiveness. And then your patience challenges my outbursts of anger. And then my forgiveness challenges your bitterness. And as we are living side by side and doing life together, the truth that we are living, that we are truthing, makes a difference on each other. It challenges, it informs, and then it serves as a catalyst for transformation in our lives. So when we're doing that, you show me hope. Because you show me that it's possible. If God can do that with you, he can do it with me. And if you're doing that, it shows me how. Because watching you live it is better than reading 100 books about it. And this is what happens as we live and walk in community with one another. You see, if there's one thing that I want you to understand and walk away with, if you've been stuck year after year and you're wondering, why can't you get out of the woods? If you're saying, this has got to be the year, I want it to be the year, I don't want to repeat every mistake that I've made before, why can't this be the year? The thing that you need to realize, and this is the one thing, maybe write this down, is that maturity comes through community. Maturity, the thing you're looking to get to, comes through community. Maturity, don't miss this, comes through community. So you want to change. You want to change. You want to tackle the impossible. You want to eat your elephant? Have some friends over for dinner. Right? It's a lot easier to eat an elephant when everyone is helping you out. The idea here is that we just do it together. That maturity comes through community. And as God works through you and you use your giftedness to help me, I grow. And as I listen to God and do what he says and I start to grow in my giftedness and I share it with you, you grow. And so you grow and I grow and I grow and you grow and we grow up. We build ourselves up in love. And so if you want maturity, you have to get into community. You need to have ongoing, meaningful relationships with 3 to 6 people. They don't have to be the same group all the time, but you need some people in your life. And these are the relationships that are going to get you through the woods. But if no one knows your goals, if no one knows what's really going on, if no one knows your battles, then there's going to be no one to help you get through them. We say it around here often. Everyone needs someone, and someone needs you. You offer something, they offer something. which is why it says in Proverbs 18:1 that he who separates himself seeks his own desire. He goes off on his own way. And this person, he quarrels against all sound wisdom. See, the person that tries to go life alone is fighting against all common sense. You could say it this way: it's insane to isolate yourself. That's just not the way you need to go. Now, you might be listening today and you're thinking, oh man, I did not like this, right? You're cringing on the inside because all this sounds really weak, right? Oh, you need other people, right? And you think, I got my family and I got work to do and I don't have time for this and I'm doing just fine and I don't need to connect. And so if that's you, I want you to think about the Navy SEALs. So you might know that during the final week of their training, they do an exercise where they swim through the ocean. And Dr. Henry Cloud in his book writes about one such situation, and he tells us about a soldier in training named Bryce. Listen as I read this. It says, Bryce was in the ocean, swimming the last long leg to the finish line. Mark, another SEAL in training, had already made it, and he was standing on the rocks above the water, eagerly watching his buddies strive toward the goal. That was when Bryce hit the wall, as he described it. It was the moment when his body would just go no more. It was done, nothing left. He tried to will himself to keep going, but his body would not obey. Bryce found himself beginning to sink in the cold water, totally out of fuel, strength, or the ability to go another yard. Push as he would, strain as he would, his body and his skills were failing him. Imagine that moment, all of those years, all of that training, all of that sacrifice about to be gone. He could see his dreams sinking with him, about to be over. What must it have felt like to have gone through all of that training and everything that he'd gone through to make it up to, but not to, the very end? As he tells the story of going down, he talks about thinking about calling out for help and signaling that it was all over and giving up. But then his eyes fell upon the land ahead, and there was Mark standing on the shore. And Mark saw him. And Bryce said that Mark gave him a huge fist pump and a yell, signaling to Bryce that you could do this. Their eyes locked for a few seconds, and as Bryce describes it, something happened, something beyond him. His body jumped into gear, into another dimension of performance that he had not yet had access to before. He was able to get back on top of the cold water again and swim toward the finish line, and he made it, and he finished, and he became a Navy SEAL. And that, Dr. Cloud concludes, is the power of the other. That's the power of other people in your life. Let me make it perfectly clear that any guy who makes it to the end of SEAL training is not weak. This isn't a weakling thing. This is a greater strength thing. See, the best that you have to offer will always come out from being connected. Maturity comes through community. And so I want to give you a little bit of advice as we talk about how this really works in our lives. And I think it'd be great for all of us to take a relational inventory right now just to answer these two questions. So think of your answers or write them down. And the first one is this: with whom can I be real? I mean, who is it in my life that I can be totally honest with? Who can I have real talk with? Is it one person? Is it two? Is there anybody? Do you have someone that you can be honest with, someone that you can shoot straight with, someone trustworthy, someone who will listen very well and then give you some great feedback? And what I'm not asking is, was there someone in your life at some point that was like this? What I'm asking is, today, do you have someone like this in your life? And the second question is really simple. It's this: do we connect regularly? When you think about that person in that relationship, say, do we connect regularly, or is it sporadic? See, I'm not talking about connecting in the way that we connect on Facebook, right? Social media promises connection, but actually breeds competition. It can be a nice way to share some pictures and see what's going on, but it's a poor substitute for true community and connection. In fact, the New York Times published an article just over a week ago entitled, "How Social Isolation is Killing Us." And the author wrote this: social isolation is a growing epidemic, one that's increasingly recognized as having dire physical, mental, and emotional consequences. Since the 1980s, the percentage of American adults who say they're lonely has doubled from 20% to 40%. And our social networks, they haven't solved that problem, right? The author concludes this in the article: a great paradox of our hyper-connected digital age is that we seem to be drifting apart. So, are you connecting regularly, like in person, like for real? And with that inventory in mind, let me give you 3 suggestions. And the first is this. I want to encourage you to start. If you're listening to me right now and you're ready to get connected, I want to encourage you to join a group. Start with a group. We have community groups here that meet every week, and they meet throughout the year 3 times for 10-week trimesters. One of them is about to start, and so if you're ready to get involved, you can jump in one of those trimesters. These community groups meet in homes, and they're the kind of place we're going to be able to build these relationships that we're talking about. And I'll be honest with you, don't expect week 1 to walk in and be like best buds with everyone. That's just not how it works. They're messy, but they are life-changing. You know, they're messy the moment that you join, right? Because we all bring our quirks to our groups with us, but that doesn't stop it from being an amazing experience. When you're finally willing to go beyond surface level and be real with a few people, it's incredible what God does with the gifting of the people around you that you might be missing. And so I want to encourage you to start by getting into a group, even if it's a little bit messy to do it. And so if you want to find out more about being in a community group, you can head out to the Next Steps area after the service, and they'll get you signed up to get more information about it. That's a community group, but we also have short-term groups, and they just meet throughout the year for a set amount of time, and they're usually focused around a particular study. And so starting up on Tuesday night is a group that I want to highlight for you. It's our women's group, and this has turned out to be an incredible place where people are finding community and they're finding out God's will for their life, and they're just growing like crazy. And so maybe that's your next step. Maybe that's where you start. And so you can sign up online, or you can do the same thing by heading out to the Next Steps area and asking for more information about it. So if you need to, join a group. And I want to be honest here, I get it. You know, maybe listening to me and thinking, yeah, I really need to get into a group. I really should do that. But you're a little hesitant because you're not sure that when you get plugged into one of these groups, you're really going to gel with these people. I mean, you're a little bit afraid that it's going to be awkward at the beginning, which it's going to be, but then you're afraid that the awkwardness is never going to go away. I get that, right? It's a little bit scary to meet people for the first time like that. So I want to let you know a few things that we do around here to help you with that. The first is that we have short-term groups, just like I talked about. So you can try it out, and if you don't click with those people, you can just not come back and go try something else out. That's okay. We want you to find a place where you're going to plug in and be real with the people around you. We also have trimesters, so our whole group schedule is set up for you to jump on, try it out, and if that doesn't work, you can get off and try another one as well. Right? And we do something else too. And you might not realize this. You might think you tell us you want to be in a group and we just kind of put you into a lottery and you end up somewhere. No, we pray about it, we think about it, and we try to get you plugged in with people in your area where you'll fit, you'll click, where it will work for you. And so you don't need to be afraid. It'll be awkward in the beginning, I promise, because that's what happens when you meet new people, but it doesn't have to stay that way. The second recommendation I have for you is to schedule it. Schedule it. We said earlier that our routines, not our resolutions, bring results. And so I think that the best way to make sure something happens is to put it on your schedule. So make it a routine by automating it. So when you automate it and it's on your calendar, then you don't forget it. You don't replace it with things that aren't as important, and you make sure that it happens. So I want to encourage you to have a conversation with your planner or your parents or your spouse or whomever and intentionally invest in relationships. The third and last thing I want to recommend to you is that you strengthen the relationships that you have. It's so easy to take them for granted. I remember talking to one of my close friends about how I was going to be moving away, and he started tearing up. And I thought, this is a fun-loving guy. I've never seen him tear up before. We've been around each other a lot. And I said, are you okay? You know, like, what's going on? And he said, you know, I wish I had done more, you know, with you while you were here. I just kind of assumed you'd be here forever. Don't we do that? We take our relationships for granted. And I want to encourage you to strengthen them by asking the next question, by being a little bit bold, by not thinking it's going to last forever. So in closing, I just want to ask you one final question, and it's this. What do you think of when you think of the church? Do you think of a concert hall, or do you think of the Avengers? Yes, the Avengers. Right, do you think of a concert hall, a concert's where a crowd gathers to appreciate the giftedness of the people on the platform? And you are entertained and you're inspired, and in the end you applaud. Concerts are great, but that's just not Jesus' plan for the church. The Avengers, on the other hand, that superhero team that has a knack for saving the world, is made up of uniquely flawed and gifted people. Each one of them uses their gifts to protect and to propel the team toward victory. So when I imagine the church, when I imagine my community group, I imagine the Avengers back to back, slugging it out against overwhelming odds because we all want to change and we're all fighting a battle. And change is hard and the enemy is threatening to overwhelm us. But the way that we win is when we all use what we have to help one another. And so the question is, will this year be your year? Maturity comes through community. And so do you need to start, or do you need to schedule it, or do you need to strengthen your relationships? What is it that you need to do next? And if you do, we will be sitting at the end of 2017, celebrating all the things that God has done in you and through you because you connected to others.